What's up, everyone? It's my first video on this channel, finally. Been a bit of a time in the making, but I am the retro format duelist of this channel, and for my very first deck list, I want to show off something from GOAT format. For those of you who are not aware of what GOAT format is, it is a 2005 Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially. It is the very beginning of the GX era, which is a common misconception by many Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. They think that's duel monsters, but it's actually the very beginning of GX, but that's not why I'm here today. Today we're going to show off a deck list that I'm pretty successful with, all things considered. But and although, yes, it is technically considered meta, it's still a pretty fun deck to play. I definitely would recommend it. Today we're going to be showing off Chaos Turbo, so without further ado, let's begin. So first and foremost, we're going to have the 3 boss monsters of the deck. 1 BLS, 2 Chaos Sorcerer. This is self-explanatory. These are your boss monsters. You want to summon them out as quickly as possible. No other further explanations needed. BLS is basically one of the greatest cards in, if not the best card in GOAT format. So definitely want to see that as soon as possible. Chaos Sorcerer is also just really good. Pretty self-explanatory. Another pretty self-explanatory choice, 3 Thunder Dragons. Definitely want to be running 3 of these. The more hand advantage you're able to sustain throughout the majority of the duel, the better off you'll be. And that's why I run 3. Oh, something I don't run 3 of, which might confuse a little bit of people, is Gravekeeper Spy. Now, I opted to run 3 initially, and you can choose to edit this build as you please, but 2 Gravekeeper Spy to me is perfect ratios. You don't want to mess around too much. Definitely don't want to run 1, but 2 or 3 would be perfectly valid for this deck. Now, getting on to Staple, Sangen searches out most of the deck, pretty self-explanatory. DD Warrior Lady, that's just good banishing for anything you can't get over normally, and let's say you're out of options with Chaos Sorcerer and BLS. DD Warrior Lady is almost always a safe option for basically any situation. Kaiku, mainly in case, not only because it's a dark, but you also tend to run into a lot of chaos in this format. So having a sort of check for that is definitely recommended. And I mean, hey, 1800 attack isn't exactly something to scoff at either, so. Now, Asura Priest. Now you could either side, I run Tsukiyomi in the side deck, so you can swap this out with Tsukiyomi if you'd like to. I've been running into a lot of Chaos Control or Goat Control builds recently, so I tend to just main deck Asura Priest entirely. But yeah, you can edit that as you please. Next off, we got 2 Night Assailants. Because we're running a more hand-costy variant of the Chaos Turbo deck, definitely Night Assailant. We're running a lot of cards that have a lot of discard costs, as we're about to see in a second. So figured Night Assailant would probably be the next best thing. Plus, it resurges your, your Magician of Faiths, your Gravekeeper Spy. In case you tend to lose any advantage, you can just add it back to your hand. It's very convenient. Next up, we have Spirit Reaper. Now, usually you see this in warrior builds, but I tend to run this in Chaos Turbo specifically because, it cannot be destroyed by battle. It's basically just a wall, so it's good, and plus it's a dark monster, so no matter what situation, you'll always pretty much need Spirit Reaper. Now, we're gonna blast through a little bit of the staples and sort of explain briefly what they do. Tribe Infecting Virus, just a good Yu-Gi-Oh! Card in general, pretty much removes up to any threat you can possibly think of. Breaker the Magical Warrior, just really good back row removal on a body. And even if you don't need the spell breaking effect, spell or trap removal effect of Breaker, you could always just leave it on and it's 1900 attack, so it's really good. Sinister Serpent, we're running a lot of discard card options, so you want to be seeing this in your hand as much as possible, especially to trigger them off. Now, 1 Magician of Faith. Now, you could run either 2 or 3. I typically run 1, as too many is a brick, in my opinion. And in builds where I tend to run 3 of them, I brick more often than not, so I decided to just stick with 1. Plus, realistically, you don't need that many lights in terms of this deck. Really, you won't. As long as you have the Thunder Dragon package, you'll be drawing into it pretty often. So you don't need to run too many lights, plus we're already running Sura Priest and a few other options, so don't get me wrong, resurging spells from your grave is pretty useful, but in general, you don't want to see too many of these things, at least in your hand anyways. Jinzo, this one, now this one has fallen out of favor in recent years, but recently I tend to run it a lot, especially against matchups like Panda Burn being all over the place. You definitely want some, especially if not that, then Warriors also runs plenty of battle traps, or Earth Aggro just saw a resurgence recently, actually. It actually just won a Go For It World Championship from what I've been hearing, so definitely want to main deck Jinzo. Definitely want a way to deal with those pesky traps. Zaborg the Thunder Monarch, I'm so glad this card has been seeing resurgence in popularity recently, considering how good of a card Zaborg is in general. It's great for removal. It's just a good card in general. Plus, it's a free light for BLS and Chaos Sorcerer. So, I mean, hey, it just works. All right, now that's it for the monsters. Now we are going to be getting onto the spells, and the spells go a little bit something like this. For spells, we're going to start off with the usual trinity. Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, Delinquent Duo. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Best cards in the format. You definitely want to be seeing these in your hand as often as possible. And next we have two Noblemen. Definitely pretty self-explanatory with lots of flip monsters running around. You definitely want something to out them as soon as humanly possible. One Mystical Space Typhoon. If I could run more than one, I absolutely would. Back row removal is really important in this format. Snatch Steal to remove your opponent's problematic cards. Heavy Storm for great back row removal. Premature Burial, just Monster Reborn except for your own graveyard. One Upstart Goblin. Now, I'm running a second Upstart Goblin in the side deck, but unfortunately, I didn't have enough space for it in this build. But definitely, you can feel free to edit the ratios however long you like. That's completely up to you. But this is where the spicy tech comes in. Monster Reincarnation. Now, most of the time, you'll see cards like this in Reasoning Gate or some sort of BS OTK shenanigans. But I think Reincarnation is a really good card, especially in this deck that involves a lot of cards that have discard costs, and especially for Chaos, anyways. Resurging your BLS or Chaos Sorcerer from the grave is really essential in this format. It's really, really important, especially with cards like Card Destruction and cards that can easily discard your opponent cards like Delinquent Duo running around in the format. You definitely want to have a way to, bring that back, of course. And Sinister Serpent, if you discard Sinister Serpent with it, it could just come back to your hand next turn, so it's really useful. Card Destruction. Definitely no explanations needed here either. We're running a lot of discard costs in this deck, and especially if you have like two Thunder Dragons or Night Assailants in your hand, ups the consistency of the deck really much so, especially with Card Destruction. Now, with that out of the way, we're getting into the traps of the deck. And the traps go a little bit of something like this. One Raigeki Break, one Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. Now, initially, I ran two Raigeki Breaks, but ultimately, I've realized that there are some uses that Wind Blast has over Raigeki Break, the same way that Raigeki Break has uses over Wind Blast, obviously. So I decided to say, you know what, screw it, let's get the best of both worlds. Let's play one of both. What would be the harm in doing that? Now, of course, we're going to blast through the power traps of the deck. Ring of Destruction, Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, Call of the Haunted, and lastly, one copy of Trap Dust Shoot. Now, you can run as many Trap Dust Shoots as you want in this deck, but I only decide to run one. One is already good enough, in my opinion. You don't need to run too many of them, because especially if you, especially late in the game, they're pretty dead cards. They're just dead weight in your hand, unless you want to run it with Card Destruction and stuff like that. But other than that, it's pretty much any more than one to me is dead weight. Alright, now moving on to the side deck, we have Electric Snake. Now this has fallen really far out of favor, considering hand control is now a rogue strategy in the format, but it definitely does still have its uses due to cards like Delinquent Duo and Card Destruction being pretty popular cards in the format. But if you do want to swap this out with any other card, you are more than welcome to. Next, we have Chaos Command Magician. Now, this is good against cards that rely heavily on their targeting effects, like Thousand Eyes Restrict, Relinquished. At times, it can be useful against BLS. It can be useful against, especially Chaos Sorcerer. Plus, it's a free Light in the Grave, so, I mean, hey, it works. Next up, we have Hysteric Fairy for Burn. This can tribute off your opponent's Ojama tokens, or really anything in general that you can tribute off or find a way to tribute off for life points. It's pretty good in general. And next up we have Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi is good. You could, like I said before, you could swap this out with your Asura Priest or whatever you decide to run at the end of the day. Definitely really good card. Really good, especially in Chaos, in Goat Control especially. I found it really useful when I ran a Chaos Control build. Dark Mimic, this one's supposed to be replaced with a King Tiger Wangu or a Spell Canceller, but that hasn't shipped in yet. So neither of those have shipped in yet. So this is just there temporarily until I can get them. Karibo against OTK decks like Reasoning and a few of those OTK decks, definitely really good against them. Mobius the Frost Monarch, good against back row removal. I consider back row removal incredibly useful, especially in this format. And now onto the spells. We have Mystic Walk, primarily against Panda Burn. Pretty self-explanatory. Swords of Revealing Light for aggro decks like Earth aggro, Water aggro, Wind aggro, whatever kind of aggro deck you can possibly think of. It's really good against it, I found. Lightning Vortex, just good in general. Plus it's a discard cost, which works well with the theme of our deck in general. So whether or not you want to side that into the main deck or do whatever you want with it, absolutely. Mind Control against Chaos Turbo Dittos. You're going to be running into Chaos almost literally everywhere. So you want something to flip your opponent's Magician of Faith or Gravekeeper Spy as soon as humanly possible. Not only to stop them from getting advantage, but just in general, it's a good way to circumvent your opponent's effects so that way they can benefit your own. Here's the other Upstart Goblin I mentioned. Again, you can change the ratios as you please. Spell Shield Type B and Royal Decree. Now these cards pretty self-explanatory. Royal Decree for back row and Spell Shield, just good card in general. So yeah, that's my deck list. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below.